You're listening to Big World Network.
Phineas Frakture and the Terror of Dr. Malondi, Episode 11, written by Joseph Gatch, read by Michael Young. Musical styling of Coolidge crank gear echoed throughout the rooms of the Frakture household, as a stress-free Mrs. Popkiss went about her daily chores. Since there was no one around to complain about the music, it was turned up as high as it could go, blasting forth from the speakerphone of the Edison Entertainment System. This station in particular played all of the classics, which, quite frankly, were lost on today's younger generation. So far, it had been a most pleasant 3 weeks, without anyone shouting for this or complaining about that, though at times it did get a bit lonely, which lasted for about 2 seconds, until Mrs. Popkiss realized that there was no one around to shout and complain. Then the bliss began again. The front bell rang in the midst of a pirouette on the sitting-room carpet, and Mrs. Popkiss sighed and turned down the music. "Too good to last," she said as she made her way to the door. A disheveled Abigail and William grunted a greeting and dragged themselves into the house. "Well, it's certainly nice to see you back. How was the trip?" "You really don't want to know," answered William. Mrs. Popkiss looked out the door. "Where's Mr. Sunshine? Don't tell me he learned some manners over there, and is tipping the cab driver." "No such luck there," replied Abigail. "We tried. It didn't take." "Then where is he? You didn't throw him overboard, did you?" "That was on the trip out," said William. "Phineas stayed behind," added Abigail. Mrs. Popkiss suddenly became concerned. "Why on earth for? Did he insult the Queen? How much is bail?" "No, nothing like that. He said that—" She was interrupted by a ringing noise from the hallway. "Excuse me 1 second. It's that blasted Ethervid again. Ever since he had the thing installed, it is non-stop harassment by ether marketers. I wish to God that someone would find a way to show you who is calling before you have to listen to some pitch about life insurance." Mrs. Popkiss turned on the screen, and a distorted image of Phineas appeared. "Mrs. Can't hear?" "Barely, sir. The signal is weak. Where are you?" I'm... It started... and Gale... there... They've just arrived." Abigail and William stepped in front of the screen. "Are you all right?" asked William. "We'll take care of them. You're in charge now. I'm—" The screen went blank, and William tried to get the signal back. Oh, dear God in heaven! Abigail and William looked at Mrs. Popkiss, who had moved to the front bay window. She was staring out at the sky, which was slowly getting darker. A droning noise, distant at first, became louder until it shook the very foundations of the house. Above, a massive fleet of airships headed east over the city. The music from the other room suddenly stopped mid-song, and was replaced by a warbling tone. "We interrupt this broadcast to bring you an urgent message from the office of the Emperor," a voice said after the tone stopped. "My fellow Americans," started Ulysses S. Grant, "it is with a heavy heart that I must inform you that our great empire is now at war. As of 1 o'clock, a massive attack by the British Empire has occurred upon the European continent. Sources reveal that a fleet of starships is also en route to the American continent as well. We have responded by launching our own fleet to intercept. I hereby issued a call to arms for every able-bodied male ages 14 to 40. You are to report immediately to your nearest police station for military processing. Have no doubt we will prevail during this time of darkness, and our shining light shall beacon our victory. May God be with us all." "What do we do now?" Mrs. Popkiss asked as she sat down. William stood behind her and put his hands comfortingly on her shoulders. "Well, for starters, could you shoot me in the foot? Just a nick will do." "William!" exclaimed Abigail, appalled at the sudden turn of cowardice. "Well, Phineas is out there somewhere, and he said for me to look out for you two, so how am I going to do that if I'm in the army?" "He's kidding," Mrs. Popkiss said, grasping one of William's hands. "At least you better be, or no more crullers for you." "Of course I'm kidding, I think. But who will look after you, then?" "I've been fine the last few weeks," said Mrs. Popkiss. "I think I can manage a bit longer. What we should be concerned about is Phineas, over there, alone, without supervision." Abigail opened the locket that she had received on her birthday, and looked at the picture within it. "I'm not sure who to feel sorry for," she said after a moment. "Him or the enemy?" Paris. Madame Zabrowska looked up from her knitting, which was pointless since she was blind as a bat, her milky white eyes staring off into the distance. She cocked her head to the side, straining to hear something outside. "What is it, grandmamma?" Sophie, her only granddaughter and caregiver, stood up from her chair and went to the elderly lady. Kneeling down next to her, she put her hands onto the woman's withered digits, and felt them trembling. "It has come," Madame Zabrowska said, her voice gravely but strong. "What has come?" "Listen, child." Sophia went to the window. In the distance she could hear a faint booming, as if someone were beating a drum in a parade. "What is that?" Sophie asked. "The sound of tyranny and despair, child. Do you see it?" Sophia looked out over the buildings towards the north, where a line of black like a rolling storm grew larger and larger. Flashes of light could be seen on the ground underneath the line, accompanying the booming. "Warships! Grandmamma, is this the end?" Madame Zabrowska turned her face to the window. "No, child, not the end, but the beginning. Until now life has been easy. It is going to be much harder now." Sophia's heart raced. If war had come, then life truly would become more difficult. "Surely there's something we can do about it." "We can only wait, child. We must endure until that day comes. He will save us, as I have foreseen it." Madame Zabrowska continued to knit, as if nothing had changed. "Who, grandmamma?" prodded Sophia. "Who will save us? When will he come?" "He will come when he is ready. The man with the broken name." Phineas Frakture lay on the beach at Normandy, France. In the distant future, someone else's future, this would be the site of the largest invasion in history. However, on this day, an invasion was taking place, not by sea, but by air. He stared up at the blanket of massive airships that made its way south into France. From an engineer's perspective, it was a beautiful sight. For those on the ground, in the Armada's path, it was terrifying. Attached to the bottoms of the airships, dangling like puppets on strings, war machines waited patiently to be dropped into the midst of the enemy to create the carnage that they were designed to mete out. Once those were released, the airships, laden with bombs, would move on to their targets, where they would soften up resistance. Finally, stormtroopers would descend into the battered cities, where they would occupy and terrorize the citizenry. Phineas picked up a flat stone, turning it over across his knuckles, and skipped it across the water. Things had changed. He would have to change if he were to survive this. He walked along the beach, feeling the cool wind coming off the channel. This was the logical outcome, he thought. If he had gone back home with William and Abigail, he would have been conscripted into the army. Of that he had no doubt. He would be trapped, following the orders of idiots who only thought in 2 dimensions. Here he was free to determine his own destiny, to make a difference in his own unhindered way. This has got to be one of the stupidest things I've ever done, Phineas thought. I just want to go home. But what if? Phineas thought of his old maxim and smiled. There are always possibilities, and his head was full of them. He would make it home, eventually, but along the way he would cause as much chaos as he was capable of. Phineas Frakture will return in The Adventures of Phineas Frakture, The Steam Wars, Europe.
You're listening to Big World Network.